Hello everyone and welcome back to JewelleryMaker Academy. My name is Mark Smith and in today's tutorials we're going to be exploring the world of seed bead netting, and we're going to be covering four aspects. We're going to be covering flat, we're going to be covering tubular, we're going to be covering graduated tubular, and we're also going to be covering my favourite, the Kisscross, otherwise known as tubular spiral netting. So we've got a lot to cover. So what I'm going to show you first of all are all the components, the equipment, the tools, etc. that you're going to need to be able to make all of the projects we're going to be covering in these tutorials. So in front of me we've got the most important items you're going to need. Bead mat. We're going to be using quite a few seed beads, including tiny little 15Os, and we won't want these beads to spill all over the floor. So bead mat is very important. Sharp pair of scissors, and then we've got needles. Now throughout the tutorials I'm going to be using a size 12, but you can use size 10. The only reason I'm using size 12 is because I'm going to be using 15Os, and some of the holes in the 15Os tend to be very small and delicate. So when we have a project with the 15O seed bead included, I would definitely recommend just moving down to a size 12. These are my favourite needles at the moment. These are the Tulip needles. Again, they come in a size 10, 11, 12 and 13. So if you've managed to see those on the website, I would definitely snaffle a pack of those. And then we've got, most important, we've got our beading thread. Now throughout the projects, we're going to be using either Fireline or Wildfire. And as you can see, they come in various colours. We've got black, we've got forest green, we've got amazing red, and we've also got our white. So depending on the colour and the size of the gemstone or the seed bead you're going to use, that'll just help determine the size and colour of your thread you're going to need. I'm just going to push that ahead. And then on a tray here, we've got all the fun stuff. This is just a little snippet of some of the pieces that we're going to be using incorporated into our designs. So we mentioned seed beads. We're going to be using three sizes, little 15Os, then we're going to be using 11Os, and then moving up to the 8Os. Then we're going to be using a selection of Bicones. These are glass, these are 4mm and also 6mm. And then if you want to add that really beautiful touch, we're going to be adding gemstones. There are four sizes that I use in the designs for the projects in today's tutorials, starting at our 4mm, moving up to our 6, our 8 and our 10mm. And we're going to be using the 6, 8 and 10 and the 4 for our graduated tubular netting, which is coming up right at the end of today's tutorial section. You will also need, really important, a basic toolkit. This is the JewelleryMaker toolkit, and it contains everything you need, and you're going to need your toolkit specifically for adding any clasps, any toggles, any magnetic clasps, etc., and any earring wires to your pieces of jewellery. So that's everything you're going to need to complete all of today's projects. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to head on to the first, which is all about your flat netting, and I'm going to talk you through and show you how to start and the two differences between horizontal and vertical. Welcome back everyone. Right, let's make a start on the introduction to seed bead netting. So there are fundamentally two types. There is your vertical and your horizontal. So first of all, in this little chapter, I'm going to show you right from the basics how we do our vertical netting. And you tend to use vertical netting for bracelets, and you tend to use the horizontal netting for necklaces. So in the next little snippet after this one, we're going to discuss the difference and the different way that the beads are laid out. So I'm going to be using 11O beads, which I tend to use predominantly for my seed beading designs. And I've gone for a gold and a black. It's really nice to have corresponding colours when you're doing your netting. So I'm going for black and this amazing gold. Now, right at the very end of today's tutorials, I'm going to be showing you how to add thread to your designs. What I tend to do, if I'm making a straightforward bracelet, it's probably about a wingspan, which is about 6 foot length. And I understand that many people, that's quite a long length and you might get into a bit of a tangle or getting into knots. So just take a piece of thread that you feel happy with, because right at the end, I'm going to show you how to add thread to your projects if you run out. So I've taken a manageable length. I'm using a black Wildfire and I've got a size 10 needle. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to grab a seed bead of a different colour than the two that you're going to use. So I've gone for a green whereas I'm using the green and the gold and the black. And what we're going to do is we're going to thread on this little bead, and we're going to feed them all the way down to the bottom, leaving about between 6 to 8 inches of thread. Take the needle back round to the back of the bead you're exiting and pull the needle through. And this acts as a stopper bead. So this will stop all of your beads from falling off, and then right at the end you'll just simply slide the bead off to finish your jewellery piece. So the first thing we need to discuss are the number of little segments that you need for your netting. Now, most of the bracelets that I do, I tend to use a 3-1 combination. And when we come to the next chapter, when we start adding our embellishments, it will become a lot clearer. So for each little segment, you will need to make an odd number of, so 5, 7, 9. 5 is the minimum, and however wide you want your cuff to be. So for example, the pieces you're looking at here, the central bracelets are 7 segments, whereas the one on the end is a 5 segment, but it just depends on how wide or thin you'd prefer your cuff to be, and obviously weight, because you are going to be adding embellishment beads. So each segment consists of the following: a gold and 3 black, a gold, 3 black, so it's always the same combination, a gold and 3 black, and as I said, it needs to be an odd number: 3 black, 1 gold and 3 black. Okay, so 5 ideally is the minimum, and as I said, any more than that your cuff will become wider. So we're going to slide our work down so it meets our needle. And then the first move we're going to make, we don't actually add any seed beads. We're going to take our needle and we're going to skip 1, 2, and we're going to enter through the gold 11-0. So when we pull the needle through that gold and pull down through, you can now see that we've got a little loop. Now this loop you will have a row of at the end of your bracelet. Then we're going to pick up our first combination, and the combination from now on is going to be 3 11-0s in black, 1 gold and 3 11-0s. So it's only that first initial section where we have 3 1 3 1 3 1. From now on, all of our sections are going to be 3 1 3. So it's a really simple maneuver. And then what we're going to do is we're going to jump 1 gold seed bead into the next. And we're going to pull that through like so. Okay, so we've already can see now. What you'll find that you have, if I just move this slightly apart, you have a full diamond and a half diamond. Okay, so we know we're on the right track. So it's exactly the same combination: 3 black, 1 gold and 3 black. And this time we're going to go round and up through 1. So we're going to go up through the first gold 11-0. And then what you will notice straight away, if I just pull that through, minding my tail, so pull that nice and tight, you will now see that we have a loop at the bottom, and there's already a space there waiting for the diamond. So we're going to pick up our next combination, which is 3 black, so 1 2 3, 1 gold and 3 black, 1 2 3, and we're going to jump the gap into the gold at the top. So when I now pull that through and lay that down flat, you now see that we've got a diamond and a half diamond and a diamond. So what I like to do, I find it quite tricky to sew towards me and away from me, so I always flip my work over and work in the same direction. So again, new combination: 1 2 3, 1 gold, 1 2 3 of the black. We're going to make our little loop, so we're going to make a little right angle and head up to the first gold 11-0. So we're going to pull that through, and you'll notice then that we have our next half diamond. Then we're going to pick up 1 2 3, 1 gold, 1 2 3, and then we're going to skip the diamond gap into the gold at the top. So then when we pull that nice and tight and lay that down, you can now see how quickly this is starting to form, and you can already see that netting taking effect. Okay, Now this is vertical netting because the needle is going up vertically through your beading. In the next little chapter I'll show you horizontal, where we sew across, so you get that horizontal pattern. So I'll just do one more of this. You can see how really simple and repetitive netting is, and it's not until we start adding embellishments that it really comes into its own. So we're going to go a right angle and up to the first gold, pull that needle nice and tight, and then we've got our big gap waiting for our next diamond. So I'm going to pick up 3 black, 1 gold and 3 black. We're going to skip the main diamond into the gold at the top, pull that nice and tight, and again I'm going to flip my work over. And as you progress along the length, the diamonds really do come into their own. You can definitely see the pattern starting to form. So what you do is you continue with this combination until you reached the length of the bracelet that you require, but remember you will be adding a clasp and some seed bead loops afterwards. So when we come to do our embellishing, I'll show you how we do our little seed bead loops, how we attach all of our embellishments, and then how we attach and pop on our clasp. So that's your basic vertical netting, so you can see how quickly that is to show you. So in the next little snippet I'm going to show you the difference between vertical and horizontal, so come along and join me. So what is the difference between vertical and horizontal netting? And the way I always categorize it is, if you're making a bracelet you would use vertical, and if you were making a longer bracelet or a necklace or a choker for example, then you would use horizontal. So what I've got in front of me are just a couple of pieces to show you the difference. So this is a beautiful bead. This is using the black and gold. And as you can see, this is a choker necklace, and what I've done is we've incorporated some little gemstone hematite drops at the bottom. So if you look closely, can you see that when we come to embellish, which is going to be the next chapter, we will actually take our needle vertically from top to bottom up through our beading. If I went horizontal, can you see the sides of the silver gemstone, of the silver seed beads there? There's nothing for me to thread. So we know that this is vertical netting. The next piece I'm going to show you is this. Again, this is another perfect example. This is the back of a bracelet, and you can see that this is vertical because the aperture of the seed bead is from top to bottom. If I wanted to go left to right, there's nothing for me to insert the needle in, okay? Nothing there is the side of the seed bead. So we know again that this is vertical. So the next piece I'm going to show you is a beautiful bib style necklace, and this is horizontal. And you can see now that when we come to do our embellishing, the seed bead, the gold in particular, is in a horizontal position. So I can take the beading to do my embellishments from left to right or right to left. If I go to do it this way, I'm hitting the side of the gold seed bead. So straight away we know that this is horizontal. Now why would we choose horizontal over vertical? So the little piece I've got ready sewn here is, if you imagine this to be a choker necklace or a long style start of a bib, what I did, there's my little stopper bead that we showed you in the first little tutorial, and I've made a long length of 1 3 1 3 1 3. Do you remember when we started the last tutorial? So you would go all the way to one end of your necklace length, then you would come all the way back, so you'd be going left to right, left to right. So ideally, the difference for me anyway between vertical and horizontal is vertical for your bracelets and horizontal for your necklace. If you went to do this particular style as a necklace vertical, it would be very tight. So if I bring this piece over here, you can see the difference. So how close the beads are together in this one, where they're further apart in the one above. So one little tip I'm going to show you is how you can graduate your piece of work. So as you can see, I've made 3 rows along here. And what I want to do is I want to try and make a V formation. So this is basically dropping a row or adding a row. You can actually elongate as well as shorten your piece as well. So what I'm going to do is I've reached this right hand end of my necklace length. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to catch the thread, because if I took my needle back through, it would start to unravel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my needle, and you can see this little aperture at the end here. I'm going to take that needle through, and then I'm going to pull just the thread so it wraps around in between that gold and black bead. So that is now attached. So now I'm going to sew through the gold, through the 3 black and the gold, like so. So when I pull the thread, that's now nicely attached. So you can now see that we're ready for the diamond, as in the previous little demonstration. Now I find it easier, even with a necklace length, to turn my work vertically. But you can still see that the seed beads are facing horizontal, the aperture. So all we're going to do now is we're going to go 1, 2, 3. Again, exactly the same combination. 1, 2, 3, that will never change. And then we're going to skip the gap into the gold. Feed that through, like so. And then we're going to continue exactly the same. So 3, 1, 3. So 3 black, 1 gold, and 3 black. 1, 2, 3. Going to skip the big diamond into the next gold, like so. Pull that through. So you then continue this all the way to the other end, stopping there. So we stop there as we started here to get that slight variation. And if you wanted to, you can, when we get to this point here, you can add another diamond if you want to. If you want a zigzag pattern, for example, you might want to do that. But if I show you this piece here, flat on the mat, let's pop those away, you can see that the sections have got larger and larger. So we've taken off a length on each of the ends to make that beautiful V formation. And can you see that we've added beads? So as we go down, again, they get bigger and bigger and bigger. And all you do there is you just add a different combination of beads. It's all about playing around and experimenting with different designs. But what I wanted to show you was the fundamental beginnings of your vertical, which we did in the previous chapter, and your horizontal netting. It's what you do with your netting is which sets you apart from your rivals. So what I'm going to show you now is, and this is probably one of my favorite techniques ever. I love doing the netting in itself, it's absolutely beautiful. And one really good thing about this type of work is it is double-sided. So you can have the gemstone side, or you can have the netted side on the back. Okay, so what I'm going to show you next is how we embellish our netting and take it to the next level. So we've completed our netting of our cuff, and now we do the really fun bit, and this is where we start to embellish. And this is probably one of my favorite techniques that I've learned over the past few years. So for this particular piece of jewelry, I'm going to incorporate one of my favorite gemstones, spinel, but this is a colored spinel, and I think the colors are just absolutely beautiful. So to correspond with this particular gemstone, I've used a beautiful seafoam metallic green and a silver as my netted design. So with this little piece I've made just to your left, I wanted to show you how we're going to incorporate, first of all, a tiny but integral part of our design, and that's our seed bead loop. So I'm going to show you how to incorporate this into your design, which will then enable you to add a jump ring and your clasp, whether it's a toggle, a lobster, or a magnetic, which I tend to use quite often for this type of design. It's for comfort, basically. Now for this particular netting here, this is my 2-row. So this, when you come to do your first initial net, would be 5 of your 3-1 combinations. The piece I'm going to show you with the design is 7 3-1 combinations, which will give us 4 rows of gemstones. If you wanted a 9, you'd have a 6 row, etc, etc. So depending on how many rows of netting you have in your design will then determine the number of gemstones. So what I definitely recommend is make one of each size and just keep it separately, maybe on your workstation, because what you don't want to happen is you don't want to decide on making a wider cuff and then run out of your chosen gemstone halfway through. So if you have 2 rows, that's probably enough for 1 strand of gemstones. This is a 4mm round. If you wanted a 4mm with 6 or 7 rows, you would need at least 2 strands. So just bear that in mind as well when you come to make your original design. So first of all, I'm going to show you how we do our seed bead loops. And for this, what you need to make sure that happens is, if you look down the left-hand side, can you see I've got a full diamond, and a half diamond down that left-hand side. You need to have a mirror image of this on the right-hand side. So we've got a full diamond, and a half diamond. And this is purely because we need to have our seed bead loops at exactly the same position on each side of our cuff. If we had a loop and 2 diamonds on the other end, it would be a bit skew-iff and our clasp wouldn't sit level. So just make sure that you have that mirror image. So this was my last little section. This was my 313 combination, and I've gone up to the top. And if you remember how we caught our thread in the previous little demonstration, we're going to do that again. So I'm going to take my needle through that loop from the back, and I'm going to pull that nice and tight so it sits in between the silver and the green bead above it. I'm going to pull that nice and tight, and now that's caught the thread. And then I'm going to take my needle down and I'm going to count halfway. So we've gone through 1, 2, 3, 4. So just bear in mind 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's 8 now. So we're going to go down 8 in the middle. Count another 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that leaves us with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I need to find the middle bead, which is number 3. So I'm going to sew through 1, 2, and bead number 3. So now I know exactly I'm in the middle of that exterior row. It does look a bit odd at the moment, but when we come to embellish, that oddness will completely disappear. So I'm exiting through that middle of that entire row. So what I'm going to use for this is, for this design we will need 15 O's. So I'm going to make my seed bead loop out of 15 O's. So I'm exiting through that middle 11O, and I'm going to pick up 10 of my little 15 O's. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm going to go round the back of that 11O and come back through the same. So you can now see, if I lay that down flat, we've got a little loop that we will then pop our jump ring and our clasp into. So what I definitely recommend doing then is just to go through the beads at least once, twice if you're using a size 12 needle, and that will strengthen that lovely seed bead loop. So what we're going to do now is we're going to continue sewing down that side, and again this will just strengthen that end as well. So pull that nice and tight, and we're going to go down through that silver 11, and then we're going to go down the outside, so all the way down through the green and through the silver. And then what I want to do is we're going to embellish in the full diamonds. We're not going to touch the half diamonds, we're only going to embellish in the full. So at the moment I'm in the wrong place. What I need to be is just at the base of that diamond, and you can see that it's perfectly positioned for your vertical netting as we mentioned in the introduction. So I'm still in the wrong place, so I'm going to go along to the left through the 3, pull that nice and tight. I'm going to go up through the silver, so I'm in that right direction, but my position here, I'm in the wrong row. I want to be over on this row, so I'm going to go diagonally up through the 3 green, so 1, 2, 3, and then that silver. So I'm going to go up through the silver, and now I'm the base of those 2 diamonds, so we're ready to embellish now. So I'm going to pull that nice and tight. So I'm going to use my lovely black spinel as my interior bead. And then I'm going to use, well, we've used quite a lot of green, so I'm going to use a bit more silver in this one. And then we've already got our 15Os in situ. So my combination for filling this gap is as follows. So I'm going to pick up a green 15, a silver 11, one of our spinel, one of our silver 11, and one of our 15Os. And what we're going to do is we're just going to jump the gap into the next 11O in our netting. And you can see that that sits beautifully in the diamond gap. So we're going to repeat because we've got a full diamond. So we know the combination, that won't change now throughout our design. So 1 15, 1 silver, 1 spinel, 1 silver, 1 15. So we always go small to large to small in the combination. And then we're going to sew across the gap into the 11O at the top of the diamond. Pull that nice and tight. So you can now see that we've got 2 diamonds. So we want to fill in the next space. Now to get there, we have to do a little bit of a loop with our needle. So not only is this enabling us to get into the right position to do our next bit of beading, but it also strengthens the 2 outside edges. So we're going to take our needle, we're going to sew through the 3 green. So we're going away from me. And then we're going to turn our work. And we want to get here. So I'm going to go diagonally across. So through the silver, through the 3 green. Give that a wiggle through. So through the silver, through the 3 green, and then up through that silver 11O. Again, I'm going to pull that nice and tight. So I'm laying it down now, and you can see that I'm in the base of this 11O in the right direction under the 2 diamonds. So all we're going to do is that same combination, which will never change. So a 15, a silver, a spinel, a silver, and a 15. And then we're going to jump the gap to fill in the first diamond. And you can see now that that sits beautifully side by side in the previous row. Then we're going to pick up again, same combination, 15, 11, spinel, 11 and a 15. We're going to jump the diamond. The silver bead is there waiting, so we're going to fill nice and tight. And then what I tend to do after maybe 2 or 3 rows, I just give it a little flatten down just to make sure that it sits nice and neatly. So we can see our 2 diamonds there. I'm in the wrong place, so all we're going to do is we're going to thread through, like so, and then we're going to go diagonally to the base of the next row of diamonds, pull that through, and then up through the 11, and then we're ready to start our next filling of our diamonds. So 15, 11 spinel. Now, I definitely recommend for this type of design either using a 3mm or a 4mm bead. I probably wouldn't go any larger than that because it would look quite cumbersome, and you'd end up having your embellishments rolling and rocking from side to side rather than being in a nice neat position. So we're going to fill the gap, and then we're ready at the base of the next diamond. So 15, 11 spinel, 11 and then a 15. We're going to jump the gap into the diamond opposite. So as you can see how quickly that's starting to build up. There's lots of toing and froing to get to the right position, but as I mentioned, that will just make sure that your outside edges are nice and straight. And you can already see that the curve here has already straightened out. So what you'll find as you go along, these lines will get straighter and straighter and straighter. So what you're going to do is you're going to continue with this zigzag motion, filling in all of the diamonds. You're then going to find the middle bead on the outside edge and perform your next seed bead loop. So now you have a seed bead loop either end. And if you want to, as a little extra embellishment, is if I just show you the piece I've made here, let's flip this over. So these have been our rows of green. Now once you get to the end, you'll see there's a little space in between the groups of 3. and the beads are following horizontally, being the outside edge. So what I've done is can you see I've filled in the gap in between those groups of 3 all the way down one side, all the way to the end, all the way back up the other end, and I've just filled in those spaces with another colour of bead. So can you see it just gives that a nice neat edge. It really does give you a nice neat straight finish. So you've filled in all of your diamonds, you've got a seed bead loop top and bottom, and then you've gone all the way around the exterior, filling in the gap in between those groups of 3 11s all the way around to strengthen. And then all that remains for you to do is pop on your little seed bead, your little jump ring into your seed bead loop, and then pop on your toggle or your lobster claw or your magnetic clasp. But I just have to warn you, this technique is incredibly addictive. It's one of my favourite all-time techniques, and I've probably made nearly 100 of this style of bracelet, this type of cuff. It's beautiful, well worth giving it a go. And as you can see, it's so easy, very repetitive, very therapeutic, and it just takes you into a world of your own making them. It's wonderful. So what we're going to do now is we're going to head into yet another of my favourite netting techniques, and this is the tubular netting. I can't give enough praise for this next technique I'm going to show you, tubular netting. It's quickly become my ultimate all-time favourite seed beading technique. For me, it's probably the most versatile of all of the rope designs. And as you can see by these beautiful pieces here, versatility, we can make dainty little bracelets using crystal. We can make little sections that we can incorporate into hoop earrings. We've got beautiful, solid over-the-head rope necklaces. And in the next chapter, I'm going to show you how to make these gorgeous graduated bead sizes pieces. So as you can see, it's so versatile. And I think we've just tipped the tip of the iceberg with this particular technique. And I'm very excited to be showing it to you today. So I'm going to show you first of all the basic way that we start our tubular netting. And for this you are going to need the following. So I'm going to use gemstones, and I'm going to use a 6mm round popcorn agate, which is one of our new finds on the show. It's beautiful, beautiful stone. And I would recommend using 2 sizes to start with. I would definitely recommend using a size 11 and a size 8. Now, over the years, I've decided for me, I prefer the look of 2 sizes of the 11.0. But for today's tutorial, those of you who've not used this technique before, I'm going to go right back to basics, and I'm going to be using 2 sizes, an 11 and an 8. I probably wouldn't go any larger than a 6mm round unless you're going to be graduating your design, which we're going to be covering in the next chapter. But for me, 6mm or your 4mm is the perfect size. So first thing we're going to do is we're just going to cut some of these off of our strand. And the colours I've gone for my netting are 11.0 and the 8 in the silver and the gold. Now, unlike the flat netting that we did in our previous chapters, you actually incorporate the gemstones at the same time as you incorporate your seed beads. You don't make a seed bead tube and then add your gemstones. You're repeating the same pattern over and over again, but incorporating the two together. So again, it builds up very quickly. So as we mentioned, take a piece of thread of a manageable length. If you're going to make a long necklace or an over-the-head 360-degree necklace, you will need to add, which we're going to be covering right at the end of today's tutorial. So we're going to pick up some 8.0s in gold and the 11s in the silver. So definitely recommend using 2 colours. Probably the most difficult decision you're going to make is how much of the netting, in particular colour, that you want. So for me, looking at the colour of the gemstones, I'm going to go for silver as my main netting, and then the little 8.0 gold as the netting crossover. So first thing we're going to do, and this is the only time, and this is quite a nice little golden rule, that we're going to be adding gemstones and seed beads at the same time. As soon as we've incorporated this row, we're going to alternate between gemstones, seed beads, gemstones. So that's a really big golden rule. This is the only time we're going to add both. So we're going to pick up a gemstone, an 8.0, a gemstone, an 8.0, a gemstone, and an 8/0. So you can see there we've got 3 gemstones with 3 8/0 seed beads. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to slide our beads down. Now we're not having a stopper bead for this because we're tying these into a loop. So I'm just going to tie a single knot followed by a double knot. So that's nice and secure. So we've incorporated our seed beads and our gemstones. So the first row we're going to incorporate are our seed bead row from now on. So I'm going to sew away from the knot through a gemstone and then through an 8/0, and this is where we're going to be starting our beaded row. So you can see that we've got a space around our gemstones, and this space is what we're going to be putting the netting onto. So this is going to be a combination that you're going to follow throughout the entire length of your piece of jewellery, and that combination is 3 11s, 1 8 and 3 11s. So 3 1 3. Very similar to the flat netting from the previous chapter. We're going to go around the outside of the gemstone into the next gemstone. So you can see now we've got an arc of seed beads going right around the outside of that first gemstone. So we're going to repeat that again. So 1 2 3, then a gold 3 1 3. So that's 3 1 3. Combination won't change. All the way around the gemstone into the next 8/0. So don't worry if you find that you'll have slight gaps. When we come to do the next stage, that will all disappear. So don't worry and think that you've not added enough seed beads. So we're going to pick up 3 11/0, 1 8, 3 11, 1 2 3, and we're going to go round the gemstone into the next 8/0. So once we've incorporated our seed bead round, we're going to do what's called a step up. So at the moment I'm exiting through this middle 8/0. We want to be exiting through the 8/0 at the first corner that we come across. So this is your step up. So we're going to take our needle and we're going to sew through the 3 11s and the 8/0 that immediately follow the 8/0 that we're exiting. So we're going to pull that nice and tight, and then what we're going to do is we're just going to pull and form a little cup of our netting. And you can see now that we've got a little zigzag pattern down the outside edge. And now at this point you can see that we've got 3 spaces, 1 2 3, ready and waiting for our next row of gemstones, because remember, we only add seed beads, then gemstones, then seed beads. We never ever add them all together now. So we've just added our seed beads, so we know now that we're only going to pick up our gemstones. So I'm going to pick up my first 6mm round. And I'm going to jump the gap from this corner all the way across to the next corner. Pull that nice and tight, and you can see that fits in there nice and snugly. Then I'm going to pick up my next gemstone, jump the gap into the next exterior 8/0. Pull that nice and tight, and then we're going to pick up our next gemstone, jump the gap into the only 8/0 that we've got left. So I'm going to pull that nice and tight. There we go. And you can now see that they are nicely snugly, and you've got that little, beautiful. So what I tend to do next, specifically if I'm using an 8/0, if I was using another colour 11/0 instead of the 8, I wouldn't do this, but because we've got the space available, I'm just going to take my needle all the way around and pull nice and tight without adding any beads, just to give it some nice strength and support. But as I said, if you've got an 11/0 in place of the gold 8/0, you won't need to do this. It's just because we've got that available space. Putting that nice and tight. We've just added our gemstones, so now we know that we're going to be adding our seed beads. Combination doesn't change. Back to our 3 11s, 1 8, 3 11s. We're going to go round the gemstone into the next 8. You can see that snugly fits. We're going to the next combination, so 3 11/0, 1 8, 311.0. Obviously, if you're using a smaller gemstone, if you're going down to a 4mm size, you will need to alter the number of seed beads you use. But again, it's all about experimenting, a little bit of trial and error to find out which combination suits you. If I am using a 4mm round, I tend to go for 212 instead of 313. And if you're going for a larger, which we're going to cover in the next chapter, you'll see in action how we go about deciding on the number of beads we're going to need. So we've added our 313. I'm stepping up to that outside corner. And you can now see we've got that perfect cup waiting for our next row of gemstones. So pick up my next. So jump the gap into the next corner. Jump the gap into the next corner. And then we're going to pick up our next gemstone, jump the gap into the next corner. Again, pull nice and tight, and you can already see the netting is now starting to form all the way around your piece. I'm just going to give that extra little bit of support around the outside. As I said, you don't have to do this, but I like to get that extra bit of strength. So we've just added our gemstone round, and now we're going to add our seed beads. So again, 3 11s, 1 8, 3 11s, all the way around. And then we're going to pick up 3 11s, 1 8, 3 11s, around the gemstone. And then we're going to pick up our last combination. So 1, 2, 3, 1 8 0 and 3 11s. It's always that combination. Round into the next 8 0. We've added our 3 seed bead sections, so now we know that we need to step up. So I'm exiting this middle 8 0. I need to be out in the exterior corner. So I'm going to sew through the 3 11s and the 8 0, which will bring us nice and neatly into the corner. And then we're ready for our next gemstone row. So you can see it's a very simple technique to learn. It's very therapeutic and incredibly addictive, and it is incredibly versatile. So if you wanted to, you can make little, we call them stations, so you make little sections and then knot them together with gemstones in between. You can make little tubes for earrings and bracelets, or you can make really big powerful statement 360-degree necklaces. And just having a play with bead size and seed bead size, honestly you'll be so pleased that you learnt this really simple technique. So this is your tubular netting, and one quick thing just to point out, you probably noticed that I use 3 gemstones. The reason for this is if you added any more, you would have a hole going down the center, and the more beads you use, the larger the interior hole would be, and it wouldn't then form a tube. You'd be able to squash it flat, and it wouldn't have any stability. So I think of all the pieces I've made, I've never made a piece other than 3 gemstones in the round, and I think for me that works absolutely beautifully. So this is your tubular netting. As you can see here, we've got that beautiful 360-degree using the beautiful quartz, and then we've got some jasper, and then we've got some crystal, and we have some turquoise there, so you can be really dainty and delicate, or big and substantial, and a really beautiful statement piece. So that's your tubular netting, a beautiful technique. And what I'm going to introduce you to in the penultimate chapter is how to incorporate different size gemstones in what we call graduated tubular netting. So without further ado, come and join me and I'll show you exactly how we do it. So in this penultimate section, I'm going to show you, again, one of my favourite, everything seems to be my favourite as far as tubular netting goes, doesn't it? But this is how to incorporate multiple size gemstones in your pieces to make graduated tubular netting. Now, as you can see, I've got a few little sample pieces here. So the piece nearest to me here is broken graduated stations. Broken as in separated, not broken as in damaged. Then this little section down in the front here, these are your full graduated stations. These are your unbroken pieces. And then this beautiful quartz piece just here, you can see it's solid graduated. So we go right from 4mm right down to your 14mm in the center. So again, it is an incredibly versatile little technique. So I'm going to show you how we do the stations, the full stations. But then again, you just need to decide if you want to elongate the 4mm before you then move into the graduated, or you want to make them half sections. So again, it's completely up to you how you want your design to look. So it's exactly the same format as your basic tubular netting, but this time, because we're going up in size and down in size, we need to replicate that in the number of seed beads we use. So I'm going to show you that now. So on my mat, I have gone for 2 sizes of 11/0 this time. As I mentioned in the previous chapter, I would definitely recommend, if this type of technique is new to you, your cross bead will be an 8/0, but for this I'm going to go right back to my 211s. And then I've gone for my ultimate favourite gemstone in the world, my multicoloured Amazonite. And then we've got a 4mm, a 6mm and an 8mm size. So just want to pop these across. So we're going to graduate from small to large, back down to small again. So I'm going to have this pewter silver colour as my netting, and then my cross, the little kiss in the side, is going to be this turquoise colour. So we're going to exactly the same way we start. So we take our 3 gemstones, and we're going to have an 11/0 seed bead in between the 3 of them. There we go, find the drill hole. So an 11, an Amazonite, seed bead, Amazonite, and then our 3. So we've got our 3 11/0s and our 3 Amazonites. So we're going to tie exactly the same way. This is how we start. So we're going to tie a single knot. And because I'm using 11/0 as your centre bead instead of an 8/0, I'm only going to tie 2 single knots rather than a single and then a double. So what we're going to do now is we're going to sew away from the knot, and we're going to sew into the first available 11/0. Now, as I mentioned in the previous tutorial, if this was a 6mm round, my combination would be 3, 1, 3. Because we're down to a 4mm, it would revert down to 2, 1, 2. But because our first round after this one is going to be a larger bead, we need to compensate for that with our first row. So if you were just doing a 4mm round tubular rope, stick with the 2, 1, 2. But because our next row is going to be a larger size, we want to add 3, 1, 3. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, and then 3. And I'm going to go round exactly the same way into my next available turquoise 11/0. And then we're going to repeat the same combination, just always the same, until we get to our larger gemstone, and then we go up or down with the number. So I'm going to pull that through, and then we're going to do the same. So 3, 1, 3. I'm going to go around into the next available turquoise 11/0. We're going to do our step up in exactly the same way. So we're going to take our needle through the next 3 and exiting through that corner point. We've added our seed beads, so we know we're going up to gemstones now. So I'm going to take my next size up. So we've gone from 4mm, and these are now 6mm. So I'm going to pick up the first one. I'm going to jump the gap exactly the same way as we did with the first row, jumping the gap into the next corner. Pull that through nice and tight. And then we're going to pick up our next gemstone. Jumping the gap into the 11/0, pulling that nice and tight, and then we're going to pick up our next 6mm round, jumping the gap into the next seed bead. So as I said, exactly the same as we did with our basic. So what we're going to do now, you can see that little zigzag pattern starting to form. So again, I'm going to sew through the row of beads I've just added, just to give it a bit of strength and give it a bit of a pull to concertina it all together. So all the way around. And again, this is where I'd recommend a size 12 needle rather than a size 10. So we're going up in size now. So our first row was 3, 1, 3. And now we're going to jump up to 5, 1, 5. So we've got a 5, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All same technique. We're going to go round the exterior of the gemstones. And you can see now there's a bit of space. It looks too big for surrounding the gemstone, but when we come to add the next row of gemstones, it will all become relevant that we need that little bit of space. So 3, 4, 5, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to go round the gemstone into the next 11-0. And you can definitely see we've got that excess space around the gemstone there. But this is to take into account the next size gemstone that we add, which is going to be our 8mm. We're going to go round into the first turquoise, and then we're going to step up to that outside corner. There we go, up to the 11. And then we're going to just cup those 3 edges, and then we're going to pick up our largest size in this particular station, and these are 8/0s, 8mm rounds. So we're going to jump the gap into that corner, and you can now see that that's the perfect fit for the number of CBs that we added. Then we're going to pick up our next gemstone, jump the gap, and then we're going to pick up our third. This always reminds me of an old-fashioned ice cream cornet, this particular shape of the small into large. As you can see, it looks like an ice cream cornet. You have a nice vanilla whippy on the top. It's beautiful. And again, we're going to go round, pulling nice and tight. And this will just secure that cup nice and tight. Perfect. So we're going to exit through our 11/0. Now if you wanted to go larger with your graduation, if you wanted to add a 10mm round, all you would do is you would then do a combination of 7, 1, 7. If you went up to 12, it would be 9, 1, 9. So it's all about adding more CBs every row. So if we've graduated large, we're going to go back down to a small size again. So what we're going to do is we're going to basically do a mirror image of the 2 previous sections. So we know that next combination is 5, 1, 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to go round into the next available turquoise. Now because this is large bead, the seed bead row will want to sit underneath. Let it for the moment. We're going to remedy that in a second. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Turquoise. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Going to go round into the next 11. And then we're going to replicate that last row. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Going to pick up an 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to go into the next turquoise. And then we're going to do our little step up to get to that turquoise on the corner. Like so. Again, pulling that nice and tight. And now we're going to add our next row of beads, which is back down to now our 6mm size. So we're going to fill the gaps. So we're going to jump into the next turquoise. You can see now that pulls it nice and neatly together, and that netting sits nice and snugly around the gemstones. So 1, and then we've got 2, and then we've got our third. Again, these are your 6mm rounds, like so, pulling that nice and tight. Again, we're going to go all the way around quickly just to strengthen and give it a bit more of a cinch. And you can see how beautifully it sits around the gemstones. So all the way around, 3 sections, and then we're going to revert back to our first row. So if we go back to the beginning, we know that it's 3-1-3 combination. So 1, 2, 3, and a turquoise. 1, 2, 3. We're going to go round into the next available turquoise. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. All the way around into the next. And this is why it's really important that you try, if you can, to use 2 colours, companion colours we call them. So I think we've managed that with these combination of colours. They're beautiful. And then we're going to go all the way around into the next turquoise, pull nice and tight, and then we're going to step up to get to that outside edge. And again, just bring those little sections nice and neatly over the top, and then we're going to revert back to our 4mm. So we're going to jump the gap, filling in the gap, there we go. And then we've got our next, jumping the gap, and then we've got our next section. And then to finish, what I would then do is I would just sew round and round and round that top row, so through the 4mm and the 11/0 all the way around. Just keep sewing and sewing and sewing, pulling nice and tight, and there will be a point where your needle will be unable to sew through the 11/0, and what we would do then is we would just cut our thread and our little station would be ready. So if you wanted to make this into a solid necklace, you would maybe do 3 or 4 inches of your 4mm and then move into your 6 and then into your 8 and then graduate back again. But I really like these little stations. And what you can do is you can make 10 of them maybe, and then put them to one side, and then maybe a couple of days later you'd come back and use them in a design. So I think we're done there. So that's your graduated tubular netting. And as you can see, these little stations are so beautiful, and just one on a slider bracelet, or maybe if you just had the 4 and the 6mm, you can make really beautiful matching earrings as well. But it's, as I said, it's an incredibly versatile technique, and I hope I've shown you now just why it is a massively firm favourite of mine. So in the last chapter coming up now, I'm just going to talk through how we finish off some of our tubular netting pieces, and then I'm going to show you how to thread your needle in one go, and also how to add thread. And then it'll be time to say goodbye. So as I promised in the last chapter, I was just quickly going to talk you through some of the ways that we finish our tubular netting. So these are beautiful little hoop earrings which I've popped onto memory wire, and all I've done is I've made a little section, and these are your 4mm, and I've actually gone down in size with my seed beads to 15/0s. I wanted something really, really delicate. So all I've done is I've made a loop at one end of my memory wire, I've fed my seed beads and my turquoise on to a point, and then I've just fed through the gap, through the centre of the tube, the memory wire, and I've completed a mirror image of the other side, and then finished it off with an ear wire. Then this particular necklace here, these are those beautiful little stations that I showed you in the previous chapter, and again this is on necklace memory wire. So I've prepared one end, I've fed a combination of gemstones, these are jaspers, beautiful blue terra jasper, and then all I've done is I've incorporated the memory wire through, so treat the memory wire as a thread in effect, all the way through my different stations. You can actually put this onto S-Lon cord, and you can knot in between your beads as well if you wanted a more fluid necklace. Then this necklace here, which again is with a beautiful green terra jasper. And then what I've done is when I've added my last section of 3 gemstones at the end, I've made another set of 3 arcs of the seed bead. And then what I've done is I've brought them all to the center without adding any gemstones. And do you remember in the last chapter I showed you how we finish off by going round and round and round until you can't get the needle through your seed bead anymore? That's what I've done with the 3/8 at the top. You can see there's a little triangle there. So you've sewn all the way around, and then I've taken another thread, attached it to the threads in that triangle, and added more thread to make my necklace. And again, I've popped on a jump ring and clasp. What you could also do is you could feed a piece of wire all through the center of that tube, and then just make a rosary link or a wrap loop either end, and then attach it to your clasp. Or what you could do is, this is one of my most coveted pieces. This is using color selenite, and this is actually 360 degrees. So what you would do is you would start exactly the same way, and then when you retrieved the length that you wanted, you simply thread the 2 ends together. So you'd start with your gemstones, you'd go all the way around, and then on this side you would end with your seed bead round, but your 8/0s would be already in the row at the beginning of your selenite. So you would do your 4, 1, 4, 4, 1, 4, and as you're doing that you would tighten and it would splice together seamlessly. So this is a complete over the head necklace, and I don't think you'll be able to find where I join the 2 ends together. It's absolutely seamless, and I think for such a beautiful gemstone like this, and you've taken all that time, it's definitely worthy of making this beautiful, beautiful design. So there's just a few different ways of finishing. Now, as promised, I was going to show you quickly just a couple of really little top tips that I think that it would help definitely with your seed beading journey. So the first thing I'm going to quickly do is show you how to thread a needle. So we're going to take our thread, we're going to cut a length off. So I'm using an 8-pound file line, and I'm using a size 10 needle with the eye. Now at the moment, when you take your thread off of the reel, in effect it's a very, very, very fine cylinder. And the eye of your needle is a very, very straight slot. Okay, so first of all, we need to prep our thread. So all I'm going to do is run it through my thumbnail and my index finger just a couple of times. And what we've done then is we've turned, you can probably see it, we've turned that cylinder into a flat inch length that will replicate that slot in the eye of the needle. Then I'm going to take that thread, and I'm not going to offer the thread to the needle, I'm going to do it in reverse. So I'm going to take the thread, I'm going to pull it down so you can just see the tip in between my thumb and finger, and then I'm going to offer the needle to the thread. So I'm just going to offer the needle to the thread like so, and then pull that thread through. So once you've had a little practice with that technique, you should be able to do that first time, every time. So it's just that tiny little tip of preparing your thread. And finally, I was going to show you how we add thread to our piece of work. So this is that piece that we showed you in the embellishing your netted cuff bracelet. So here is my working thread, and as you can see, I'm a long way off completion, so I will need to add more thread. So what I've done is I've taken a new length of thread, I've taken one end, and about 3 or 4 inches from the end, I'm just going to do a little loop. I'm going to hold it in my thumb and finger, and then the rest of the length I'm going to make another loop and push up through. So what I've made is a slip knot. It's a little simple little slip knot that you can make larger or smaller. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to offer that loop to my existing thread that's on my piece of work. So I'm going to feed that down, and then I'm going to pull nice and tight. So that's now captured the new piece with the old piece. The new long piece I've got coming off to the right, and then I'm going to take the new thread, the 2 shorter threads, and I'm going to pull them down so it meets my work. So see what I did? I've kept the long thread in my right hand, and I've pulled each of the 2 shorter threads down so it meets my work. So then I would continue with my beading, and when I was probably an inch away, I would then go back and I would tie a double knot to those 2 threads. So one was the old thread and one is the shorter end of the new thread. I would go in, I would cut when I'm happy that that knot is nice and secure. So I'd go in with my sharp pair of scissors, I would cut away those 2 ends, and that new thread is now nice and secure and it's ready to continue with your working. So for example, that if I'll bring it back across, so this piece here, I probably had 4 lengths of beading thread. So just using that invaluable little, tying the little slip knot and then feeding it through onto the existing thread. It's such a lovely little tip, but a fail-safe way of adding new thread to your work. So I hope you have a little practice of that and become an expert in your needle threading. And I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank you all for joining me in what's been a bit of a marathon as far as netting is concerned. I've had a whale of a time, it's been an absolute joy. And make sure you look on the JewelleryMaker Academy website just to see if there are any new tutorials being added. I know I'll be adding a few more in the very near future. So thank you very much for joining me. Hope you enjoy learning these incredible new techniques, but as I did warn you very early on, bead netting is very, very addictive.